to use the rhema of God
that you are supposed to use.
Joshua knew in his aeon it had to be.
It has been given to us.
And he brought the word to them. He said, get ready.
And I thought it was amazing.
For in 3 days, you're going to cross this Jordan.
And it was actually timely. Which kind of father would actually show you his secrets?
You and all these people, and take them into the land.
He showed up and played all out.
Told their fathers, I'll give to them.
Because we've been shown everything.
That's what I told you in 2020.
But against principalities.
I said, I don't see these guys in my aeon. I don't see the vaccines running my life.
Having a mindset.
I said, I don't see them in my aeon.
It was timely for him to have actually come out with this message.
I said, it's not in my aeon that we're not going to be going to church.
He is God above all.
I said, no, 1,000 times.
Yeah, we got to declare.
I see myself in the church of God.
It's a conditioning of the mind.
I see us congregating again.
This is the message of the gospel.
Yeah.
Just knowing how to actually set the courses.
I'm listening to you and I'm hearing
words are things.
But you need to start speaking.
Don't you get it?
You want to proclaim the word.
This age is your age.
Let the word of Christ dwell in you.
So that you have a reservoir.
A reservoir of the word. They will not dictate the circumstances of our life. Through faith, we understand that the words were framed by the word of God. So what were they made of then? If they were not made of things which do appear. I told you words are things. Of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named. And many don't get it. But the translation that gets it most accurately is the NIV. And I'm not by that declaring the NIV to be the best translation by any means. I'm just giving it to you from the original construction in what gives you the best of this particular verse. So I'm going to read it to you. It says, for this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derives its name. Did you notice the difference? The other one says, every family. You see, now, they're wrestling with two major Greek words there, and that's why they have a problem. And they didn't need to if they just studied more properly. But here's the point. Let's go again, 14 into 15. For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth. You see, he's got a family, and some of the members of that family are in heaven, and some are in the earth. Now, what's here is a description of the spiritual kingdom of God. Remember, in St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 1, and from verse 14 into 15, let's read.
Well, this is Chronicles of Prophecy. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the show. So this is day 2 of Your Love Will Specials with our dear men of God. Season 7, Phase 7. That's it. And we're celebrating, tomorrow in actual fact is the grand finale and the grand celebration of 200 episodes of Your Love Will Specials. Can you imagine that? Uninterrupted. No, should I say uninterrupted? Yes, uninterrupted. I know we had breaks in between, but uninterrupted, unapologetic, and very effective. I'm telling you, life-changing in every sense of the word. Isn't that amazing? So Whew, the Church of Jesus Christ is celebrating. The whole world is celebrating because the word of Jesus Christ is penetrating every nook and cranny. Praise God. All right, so today we're going to be starting off with a whole lot of exciting things that we're talking about that are happening around the world. But I would like to say to my colleagues here, you know, the prophecy of the realigning of nations and all that is really happening every day in our world. Like the things that are happening politically, geopolitically, you do geopolitics now, you can't even deny it. And now the next big thing is happening in Africa. We're talking about the BRICS summit, and that's literally a few days to go.
Yes.
Have you seen what is happening though with the BRICS summit? So do you know there are other countries that have applied to today? Yeah, they now want to come on the BRICS thing.
It was always
block.
It was always one thing that they were actually sort of like crypto about. Remember, many nations were actually checking out to see really is the hegemon broken as we thought it would actually be broken, and they were waiting to just give, because when you look at the official report was more than 48 countries from Africa. How many countries do we have in Africa? 54. That means almost the rest of Africa had actually applied to be in membership of some sort, either in one way or the other. And you now have South America, which is also part of it, and you have the rest of the global south. Most of them have actually been indicating to say, despite us being in different, let's say, customs union or different groupings that they have, they would want actually to be part of BRICS. And we're actually seeing, this is actually the cresting of that BRICS as a bloc. Because after the August summit, you are going to see most countries that probably would not have actually come out in the open to say they would want to be part of BRICS, they would do the same. It's the same thing that is actually happening again on the Israeli side. If you look at the whole of South America, they are busy setting up their embassies, because remember, Israel is also touted to be actually wanting to get involved greatly with BRICS. And at the same time, you're also looking at the Middle East, your Gulf nations. They have also indicated they might not actually join BRICS as a bloc, but they would want to actually work with BRICS with what it is actually given when it comes to oil, when it comes to gold, and when it comes to some other things. So undeniably, we're actually seeing history changing.
Yeah. And
in this case.
Yeah, and also when you look at the theme that is running with BRICS Summit this time around, you can't really run away from what you said. The polarization of nations is actually very clear here, because they're saying they want to have economic cooperation for the Global South.
Yeah.
So the Global South is actually part of the focus for the BRICS Summit. And when you look at the marginalization, or rather the economic pillaging that was taking place in Asia, in Africa, you look at South America, all those countries that were marginalized, that were being taken advantage of by the current economic system, they are all banding together to take on the United States hegemony, or United States dollar-led economy. So it's a very clear message. If you were in doubt that the polarization of nations and the American hegemony is being taken on, the BRICS Summit is actually a testament of that.
Yeah. See, an avalanche doesn't just fall. Most people start reporting on the avalanche when it's coming down. Like, oh, something, but before an avalanche fall or starts cascading, it has been dripping, like something out there, something in here. You know, the base is shifting. Then, and those who know what to do then start running, right? But everybody else is like, oh, it just fell. No, it didn't just fall. I'm saying that to say, I mean, before the year of the gathering clouds, the Eve service, Pastor talked about the polarization of nations. So the foundation, the scenery for this polarization has been building. It's not just now. It didn't just start happening now. Yeah. All the things that have to be in place for that word to be executed and delivered were coming in place. And we know about it because it was said not today. Mm-hmm. So when people just jump like, oh, the world is getting polarized. No. A couple of years ago, it was already coming in place. It was already coming in place. And what leaders of nations that have been attentive or are attentive to the prophetic should have known that it is coming in place. And start hedging. Yeah. Start knowing exactly where you should be. And so what we're seeing now is let's say, the first sign that polarization Pastor talked about. So I'm not saying this New Year service, 2 New Year services ago, we talked about polarization. It is now showing forth. And sometimes these prophecies, they build layer by layer, line upon line. Then everybody just jump on their predictions when it's already mature. No, it's long ago been maturing, been brooding. And like you said, some nations now feel comfortable to want to say things that they would otherwise have not said, or apply for things they would otherwise have not applied for.
Yeah.
True?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, we're actually also getting to see what our dear man of God actually said. Remember, he said, the glory on this church, particularly in 2020, when he was actually launching us into what the church was supposed to do. Because remember, your love word was essentially to help the church, steering it where it's supposed to actually go. Particularly when it comes to the nations. Remember, it has always been God's idea for nations to be free.
Yep.
There is a certain group of people where they actually just decided, look through our cabals and through, of course, crookery, we can actually run the nations, and we can pillage nations that we want to pillage because they are not in our groupings. And all of a sudden, when you look at what Pastor actually showed us, the image that Daniel actually saw, remember, anybody who gets in the path of the church gets crushed. And that's what we actually see. The structures that they set themselves. When Pastor said, remember during the birthday celebrations, before we actually got to know about COVID and what was actually going to happen, he said something that is very, very, very important. We are getting to see that's exactly what is happening. The works of men, which include things like hegemony, whether you were influenced by demonic spirits of some sort, or you did it by yourself because you thought it was actually benefiting to you. We're actually seeing exactly that actually happen today. The works of men are colliding with the works of God. And we know what happens because the image actually shows us that stone took everything. Because remember, all these nations that we're actually seeing, they are remnants of either the Greek society that was there, or some adopted, from the Babylonian system, the Medo-Persian and the like. And of late, we know about Rome, because Rome is essentially what informs most of the constitution, the judicial system. But we are actually getting to see that the church is bigger than all this, and proving to the world that the church is greater than anything that they've actually said. When you look at it, who would have actually thought U.S. hegemony would just collapse like that? Because that's how it will actually just crumble.
It seemed impossible that that would ever happen. Not even in any stretch of thought would you have imagined that possible.
No.
Here we are today.
All empires fall. There's a basic cycle. All empires fall. But the point is, what empires do is they try to study why other empires fail so that they don't make the same mistake and not fall. And they still fall. What we see about the United States system is not just about the cycle of another empire or another hegemony. It was a cycle to spread the perfect system by which the devil was supposed to conquer the nations. It was not just geopolitical. Many others were geopolitical. The Mongols, geopolitical, just land mass. Just go nation after nation. But the American hegemony in quote unquote the West was not just another form of hegemony. It was a form of global conversion.
That's what we're
Let's
saying.
set up a
You wouldn't
God.
have thought that
let's
it
set
would
up a
collapse
God,
now.
new God that everyone will serve. And they were doing it by this level of social engineering. And like I said, I could understand why the devil would think that, because the Lord himself, the America was a how's it called? Is it a city on a hill? There was a light on a hill for which the gospel went forth to India, to China. I mean, we can call the names of great missionaries, even unknown missionaries that went around. So the enemy was like,
What a nice entrance. Let me just use
let
this.
me just use the same. Let's go and win this place over. But, and from there we've seen how this whole Frankenism, all those things we've talked about a long time, moved from Europe, settled in through the masonry, came in form of humanism. Even the Nazis moved, and it became a melting pot, not for what happened before, but now for the enemy to go through the nations and conquer the nations under one name, but not the name of the Lord Jesus. Remember what Pastor said? That Jesus was saying something when he said, if another came in his name, you believe him. So that another is the one that has to come through this system. But the system has to be ready. And for once, the enemy wants to use this. And that is what this is all about. It's that kingdom warfare at that level. That's what this is all about.
It's really, I can imagine though how angry the Americans were. So today I was just doing some research and thinking. Not so long ago, we had the ambassador of the American embassy to South Africa saying that, there's a security alert or whatever happening in one of the most busiest, richest square mile in this part of Africa. And that was in Sandton. Now, we have the BRICS summit that is also coming, and it's happening in that same place. America is definitely not happy. They're very angry right now at the response of the BRICS summit happening, how all these other countries are coming, and now we've had some of them even today as we speak applying to be in the BRICS summit. And I thought to myself, the devil cannot be used in this, the devil cannot be allowed to prevail. Because I thought about it. What if they want to issue another security alert? Actually, just because they can?
In the morning, there was actually a hearing, particularly when it comes to the state of security for BRICS.
Yes, it was a briefing that happened in Pretoria.
And the rumors that are actually circulating, particularly when it comes to the intelligence security, is that they would have wanted to actually use the same tactic that they used when it comes to, remember, they did that with the RAND, and it tanked a bit. And they also did it with the meeting when they said the LGBT gathering that was actually gathering that time, there was a bomb threat of some sort. And it's something that will forever be deployed, of course, by those who are actually losing. But again, I like the fact that when you're looking at it, particularly looking at it with the eyes of reality, the church is actually forging forward for the nations in such a way that all their plans, their strategies, they're actually coming to naught. In the past, maybe it might have actually worked, but as of now, it doesn't actually surmise to anything.
In that particular briefing, they were actually saying that they are very much on the alert.
Of course.
Anything is possible. Because a lot of foreign journalists, I've got a few foreign colleagues, journalists that are already in the country, they were asking all sorts of questions, they're concerned. I said, there's no need to be concerned, really.
Yeah, but there's no threat, except it is media generated. And that tells you the level of implicit distrust most of these nations have in the United States. Because, okay, why should everybody be worried about security conditions in South Africa? Why? There's no basis for that. Now, why is everybody thinking about it right now? It's an implicit, it's an implied mistrust there, or distrust that, because we're doing something you don't like. Look at what happened in Niger. You don't like the fact that, and all of a sudden ISIS shows up.
What's happening exactly? What a coincidence.
How does ISIS show up to anywhere you don't like? I mean, we saw there was oil discovery in Mozambique. Who showed up?
ISIS.
What happens? Once something good comes to a place,
ISIS.
Then you have to go set up a base there because you want to help them solve ISIS.
You can keep on counting nations. You can put in Uganda, they found their gold, ISIS. And when you look at it, it doesn't actually have any sense of reality in the sense that these nations are not even actually Islamic nations.
They're not exactly.
Far from it. If you look at Mozambique,
so how is ISIS
they're almost
showing up?
as high as what, 97% Catholic.
Yeah.
And then ISIS becomes your problem. Uganda, the same thing. They are more on the Christian side with evangelicals and the like. And just a small portion is associated with Islam. But now you have ISIS. And you can count, as many other places as you would want. But essentially, the interesting thing is whenever something good was about to actually go forth, they would deploy the same tools. The same tools that they used in colonization, neo-colonization, and in this case, sometimes hard power.
Yeah.
Good thing is we are getting to actually see, and the people of different nations, including their leaders, are getting to see that this is just an empty threat now.
Yeah.
We have come out of the
An
ambits
empty
of the...
threat.
And that is why
that's what it is.
That's why the happenings of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Mali and Niger, if you notice, is not making the news rounds. Yeah, but everybody kind of know where this is. It's an implied feeling. Okay.
They've been lightly esteemed.
They've sent their boys.
Yeah.
They send their boys.
Even with
implied.
Even with Reuters and AFP behind them, they still didn't make actually mainstream news.
Exactly.
Wow. So now, I don't know whether I should say for the first time, but maybe for the first time in this current time, because there's been so much heated back and forth that we've been seeing politically different countries, and especially with what is happening in Niger right now, Russian President Vladimir Putin openly spoke about this. I don't know whether I should say one or almost a warning.
It's a signal.
It's like
It's a signal.
It's a coded message
it's a
somewhere
message,
there.
yeah.
You know, like warning the United States and NATO, France, and their African allies over Niger. So Putin has warned the pro-Western coalition of ECOWAS, that is the Economic Community of West African States, and the United States to perish the thought of any military intervention in Niger Republic, saying the war is planned to expand beyond Niger and set the entire region on fire. So he warned that only peaceful settlement through diplomatic means is to be pursued, and that anything to the contrary will have great consequences. So he issued this statement during a phone call with the president of Mali, Assimi Goïta. Earlier, shortly after the calls, Mali and Burkina Faso leaderships sent a very strong warning to NATO. Of course, they now had courage now, right? From the Nigerian capital, Niamey, telling NATO not to dare try repeating in Niger what it did in Libya, as there would be far weightier consequences that they can imagine. Now, at the same time, Wagner PMC fighters are reported to have almost completely marked every nook and cranny of the Nigerian capital, that is Niamey, in combat readiness. And hundreds of extra Wagner volunteers are reported to have arrived in Niger in the last 24 hours, boosting their troop levels in the country as the awaiting game begins. There we go. So the reason why I found this very interesting is that now it's eye for an eye. We're open now. So you have your own allies. Russia has also come out to say, listen, we're good here and we're happy to help any African countries that need help.
It's
very interesting.
The first indication, like I said, an avalanche doesn't just fall. So polarization doesn't just happen. But this is a clear line that shows nations on all sides. And I think in the coming months, probably a year from now, you will see that some countries can be in both sides, because some countries are trying to hedge, be here and be there. It will get to a point they cannot. And it might not even end up being two. We're just seeing two now. We might begin to see fractions between each camps. But what we saw with that coded warning, and he also said that in the Arms Trade Summit, that said Russia is ready to help any country. That was way more than code. It was a threat. Russia is ready to help any country that wants to rid itself of Western colonialism or Western imperialism.
And remember also the African countries, they can actually read the room. How did they actually come out from colonialism, direct colonialism or imperialism?
Yeah.
They were held by the same groups of people that are actually saying, look, let's discuss, let's talk, what can you actually do? And when you look at it, the Russians are actually selling security, or the guarantee of security. They've actually been doing that for quite a long time. And you're looking at it at the nick of time. The Westerners were about to actually repeat what they actually done in the past.
And they were coming on strong.
You can actually just imagine, let's say, if Niger didn't have the Wagner forces.
Oh, they would have been grinded.
Right now, we'll be talking of a different story in Niger. Or the same would have been true for Mali, for Burkina Faso, for some other nations.
CAR.
Some other leaders tried to actually do it, like what the Russian president was actually referencing. What happened to Muammar Gaddafi? For just simply saying, look,
and
our oil and our
is,
gold.
when they come in, they destroy for good. Like you're saying, Libya right now, Syria right now, Ukraine right now.
Yemen.
Once they come in, Afghanistan, they just completely destroy everything. Once they destroy Niger, Putin is right. All the other neighboring countries, it'll be like a ripple effect.
True.
Yeah.
So let this be an awakening call, though, for many African countries. Because right now, Africa is a target in many ways, resource-wise, especially land-wise. I mean, Bill Gates is there with his hawk eye looking at Africa.
Why did Herod kill 2,000 babies?
Exactly. That's a good question, though.
Herod killed 2,000 babies because he heard that there was a new child who would be king. Any Herod will kill any new world because that's a threat. So they know because they have more data about African resources and African potentials than Africans do. True. Just because we don't have a data culture. They know the value. So they would rather burn the place down than to see that child grow up to be a king.
Sure.
It's that analogy. And that is why the French, the West, and number two, it only makes them richer if Africa burns. Because then they'll sell weapons, and if you can't pay, then you give us your seaports and your mines and your oil fields and your gas fields. So you kill yourself and they get richer. That's what they're doing in Ukraine right now. So it's that analogy of Herod. We can kill 2,000 kids, but we just don't want that new world to show up.
That's it.
Yeah. But it is my sincere hope, though, that what Putin actually said is somewhat of a strategic
Chess play.
Yeah, exactly. Of strategic, trying to actually ward off the attacks from the West to say, if you come in, we are ready. Because
let's resolve it diplomatically.
Exactly.
It's a good
It's
point.
like what the West is actually doing with China,
Yeah.
where that tongue, the South China Sea,
Yeah.
they've got their military bases. It's like, okay, we are ready for you so that you don't move, so that you don't advance, because we don't want another war. And it's my sincere hope that the leaders within that particular region don't take that to say we can take on
A war.
a war
There we
so
go.
that they can
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
a battlefront. You
To
don't
be
want that.
candid, nobody wants war, even the military officers. Everybody goes to war with a hope to win. It never ends like that way. All right? Are you getting it? Everybody believes like our side is going to win. But eventually, it is brothers, sons, daughters, mothers, sisters that perish. So we don't want it. And there is no economic benefit for that region to go to war. It doesn't exist. More because racially, culturally, these areas we're talking about in West Africa share common history.
Of war.
No, not of war. Common ancestry. I'm talking, these are the descendants of the great, what's the name of this dynasty again that ruled to Timbuktu?
Yeah, Timbuktu. Yeah.
That great empire, the Futa Jalons, that even came down to, they share common culture, common values with these people than those in northern Nigeria with the southern Nigeria. So people, it's like a family fighting
Even
themselves.
apart from that, they also still share a common culture of many coups, you know,
Exactly.
militia groups and all that.
But
I
most of
think
these
they're also
schools were,
tired.
most of these
They were
schools were
orchestrated by the West.
Exactly.
But that means that they're actually tired. That is even more reason for them not to
Which is why he's
want.
actually also impressing that. Because remember, the downside is you can share the same common ancestry, history, and even a common agenda.
Yeah.
But you are not without your Judases, your Iscariot.
There's always a sellout.
And when you look at it,
Fifth
I
column.
was just thinking about it from the point of just a few weeks ago, the things that have actually been done by Niger, they are affecting France to such an extent that they are having load shedding. You know, power is actually going.
And it's only been,
and,
what, a month?
and remember, we know Europe is spent.
Yeah.
What does somebody who doesn't have anything to lose do?
They become desperate.
They become desperate and they can do anything.
And
I
they
think
lose their
that's our
temper.
hope, because we're looking at a case where maybe a player like Russia, being in Africa, they are also looking at, okay, there is nuclear fire here. We shouldn't actually proceed. And if anybody can actually sketch this idea of actually going to war even within the borders of Africa, then the African nations who want to actually forge forward can actually forge forward with the promises of trade and the promises of a new economy that is actually coming. Otherwise, there is a risk of always having Iscariots. Right now, we already know some of the Iscariots that are actually running around. They are taking a whole organization of ECOWAS, taking it to a different direction, which not everybody else agrees. And I think that's the downside that we have to actually pray against. Because when you look at it, you always have one person who is willing to actually be bought for
It's true. And then, you know,
30 pieces of
ECOWAS,
silver and the like.
ECOWAS was actually applauded by many at the time of Yahya Jammeh,
Yes.
the former Gambia president, on how they handled that issue until he now went into exile. ECOWAS was actually applauded by many. How they,
I still do applaud
yes, they
ECOWAS.
handled it very well and all that. That's the same ECOWAS we're expecting to see now.
But
it looks like they're different.
no,
There's a shift in the mind.
It's not just a shift in the mind. It's actually apples and oranges. Number one, the ECOWAS decision in the case of the Gambia had almost zero, if not zero, foreign interference. That was one. Number two, what happened in Gambia was there was an election. The winner had emerged. The votes had been counted. Winner had been declared. Certificate had been issued of return had been issued and everything. And the guy was like, you know what? Let's forget about everything. So it wasn't a military coup. In this case, it was a man saying, let's forget about everything. When the other government was already setting up their offices and everything. So there was a discussion. I think it was spearheaded by Buhari and Madam Selif. And what we saw is, number one, there was no foreign interference. There was no air of nationalism. The Gambians were delighted to even present Yaya Jammeh to ECOWAS. They were ready to give him up. And it wasn't freedom from any foreign one. What we see in Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso was first, before you say it's a coup, it's freedom from France.
That's what I'm saying. In Niger, it's almost the same.
Yeah,
Exactly the same.
yeah.
But it's freedom from France.
I think to a certain,
People in Niger
to a
are
certain
happy.
degree, because remember, the brand of African leadership that we have seen on the African continent for quite a long time, even without direct colonialism like we've seen, let's say, with Francafrique, just find out where do they have their mansions, their sports cars, or anything that is considered
West.
luxury, the yachts and stuff in the West. And ideally, you were looking at the same things, because they are willing to actually look the other way when you are favoring their interest, though you might not actually be a very good leader. And when I look at it, I see it as a case that has actually plagued that whole region, including the ones that are actually in Central Africa. In fact, you can actually even extend it to Southern Africa, because we have seen the same actually happening with Zimbabwe, with a military-assisted transition where somebody just decides, look, either it's corruption that is actually being fomented, because remember, at the end of the day, like now we are getting to actually find out monies that were disappearing in the nation of Zimbabwe were showing up somewhere in Europe, in Swiss accounts. And when the citizens or the military actually comes out to actually do that, I think it should be applauded, because you're looking at the path that they have preached when they speak about Pan-Africanism is the path the citizens or the military would have actually taken. And when you look at it, there's a change in political dynamics where the militaries were either just armed up to keep dictatorships in certain cases, or they armed up to actually effect coups that didn't actually help the citizens, like we have seen in a number of countries. But there's a brand of political leadership that is actually coming even from the military itself, where they are looking at national interest.
Yep.
And I think that's the difference, that most of these bodies, whether you say SADC, EAC, or you're looking at the Great Lakes region, or you're looking at African Union, which is the mother body, they are supposed to actually look at things the way they are supposed to be handled, just like you would actually find, knowing very well that they have everybody else circling to try and get resources, or to try and impose their interests that they've set for quite a number of years. You can just imagine how much of improvement that has actually happened, let's say, to the Gambia, or to Mali, to Burkina Faso, to Algeria, or if they had actually succeeded with Libya, if all of that region was stable, and their oil was essentially going through the right channels. And now there are people who are actually coming from OPEC and OPEC Plus coming to buy from what you actually have. Or even the new discoveries that we know about Niger. I think it's a different move altogether. It's a different movement that calls for the citizens. Listen to some of the terms that you're actually hearing from the military. For the first time, you have a military that actually says the citizens are supposed to eat. Never used to happen.
Imagine
when
that.
the coups came on, when the soldiers came on air, they were essentially saying, we have seized power.
Yeah.
Somebody's out.
The
we are in.
military is actually going to meet the people, the citizens, to find out what their needs are, even in Burkina Faso. But do you realize that all these things are also a result of prayer?
True.
Yeah.
It could have been a different story.
Oh,
it could
no.
have been
It
all
could have been.
war,
Definitely. It
full
could have been.
force out there, people dying and all that. But prophecy is really beautiful.
Nothing just happens.
At that time of the polarization
Yeah.
prophecy of the nations,
Yeah.
do you realize that immediately after we started praying for the nations?
Yep.
And Pastor preached intensively on the importance of us praying for those nations and what the Bible actually ordered us to do.
Yes.
Which I've always read that verse.
Yeah.
Can I be honest with you? I understood it differently. First and foremost, I understood
You're
it
not alone.
differently. Until he now highlighted it. First and foremost, you pray for
Leaders.
your
Leaders.
leaders,
And those in
then,
authority.
then you now go else.
And I like
for
the fact
prosperity,
that
so that we live a peaceable life. So these are the peaceable benefits of life that we're having now.
Nigerians.
And
Where
I
the
like the fact
military
that
goes
he-
out to ask its
he
citizens,
highlighted your leaders, elected, unelected,
you still pray for
dictatorships,
them.
democracies, you still pray for them
Yeah.
so that you can enjoy peace. And we are getting to
Yes.
actually see peace everywhere.
It's true, because I would have come out on Worldview, guns blazing, thinking this was an undemocratically elected president, and I will speak about it in every way until he changed our mindset.
True.
This is prophecy, the prophetic
Yeah.
at work in the world we are in today. I kid you not. People might just think, oh, African leaders have woken up.
No.
There's prayer that went into it.
Exactly,
There was a
yeah.
man standing in the gap, still standing in the gap,
Yeah.
and changing our minds,
Yeah.
changing
And-
our hearts.
And,
Yeah.
and also when you look at the longevity
wow.
of that particular teaching, because it has been like that consistently from 2020 to say, pray for your leaders. And it's one prayer point, to be honest, which has actually
It's been the prayer of an
consistent.
everyday, even, I don't know, whether you're in Christ Embassy, whatever, whether you're in what cell group, it has been that prayer point.
First
Exactly.
of all.
Pray for the nations and the leaders of the nations.
Yeah. So it's a testament of the fruits of what the body of Christ can actually produce.
Yeah.
Whew, this is
Yeah.
so beautiful, right?
It
We
is.
Indeed.
really are in the
Indeed.
last days where we are really seeing the prophetic coming to pass right before our eyes.
And come to think
living
about
in it and practicing it.
come to think about the impact of the gospel in those nations. Because remember again, we were looking at an Africa that had actually become the mainstay of Christianity, of evangelism and missions. And suddenly from nowhere, there were undercurrents of trying to actually destabilize. Because once you have war, there is a high chance you most likely are not going to be able to reach everybody else. As you, many people actually go into IDP camps and the like, and some move, and some are on boats.
Human
and then
trafficking.
human trafficking,
Everything in between.
everything else that, of course, the globalists would want to actually see happen would have happened. But when you look at what the gospel has actually been doing, because remember, everywhere else, if you look at Europe, churches are being converted into mosques and the like, and things that you shouldn't actually expect. And God had actually come. I'm actually reminded of the prophets that Pastor Benin was actually giving when he was in Nigeria. To say, do you know there's an old age prophet that said, from this region, it will actually become the new spiritual Jerusalem. The gospel will actually be going from here, talking about West Africa, of course, centralized in Nigeria. That was going to be a
It's
thing of
already
the past.
live. We can see the prophecy rolling out.
And when you look at it, just look at what has actually happened. I was just thinking yesterday, we got a caller from Niger. That's a French country. How did they get the gospel, which is mainstayly in English? That means it has actually been going. Either in French or in English, they're actually getting the gospel. Then just imagine such a nation if they were to actually descend into war.
Oh, that's
The-
really, yeah, that would be disastrous.
The last
at this
time that we
point in
had
time.
figures from Libya, remember, Libya was actually advancing so much. There were so many Bibles and TV stations that were spreading the gospel. Come NATO, and of course, their liberation movement, and it became something else.
Yeah.
Completely destroyed. We still need to continue to pray for all those people. But thank God for the word of God, because all those souls are being preserved.
True.
You see, all those souls are being preserved for the gospel of Jesus Christ, not for anything else. It's for the gospel of Jesus Christ to continue to spread. So that's the latest coming out there on what has been happening in Niger and that whole particular region, and of course what other allies are also now saying about this issue. Now let's quickly just touch on BRICS again. I know we spoke about it when we opened the show. Morocco has officially submitted its bid to join the BRICS grouping, or Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as you'd all know it. So this comes ahead of next week's much anticipated summit in South Africa. I really am waiting for it. That's the truth of the matter. Now with this, the Kingdom of Morocco joins other nations like Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Egypt, which are also vying for a spot in the Economic Alliance. More than 40 countries have expressed interest in joining the BRICS group of nations. Nations that expressed interest include Algeria, Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Cuba, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Comoros, Gabon, and Kazakhstan. Now, LN24 SA will be live at the BRICS Summit. Viewers can call us to let us know what you would want us to talk about, or who you want us to talk to, and what you would want us to discuss during that particular summit. And you can actually do it now as we open the lines. Because we have, I don't know how many heads of states that are going to be here in this country. All of them here to talk about, obviously, ways to prosper their economies and move forward with their economies. So we have the whole world in our hands.
Yeah.
They're like right here,
Yes,
in the palms of our hands, you know. So we have to seize the situation, the opportunity to preach the gospel.
Yeah.
Over
that's
and
true.
above questioning them, but to
Exactly.
preach the gospel to
Exactly.
them, so that when they go back, we would have
Let them
Daniel.
know that
penetrated and
there's a
impacted them.
prophet in Zion.
There is a prophet in Zion who has been talking about your nations,
Yeah.
actually. So it's going to be a great time for us here in South Africa as we actually host the BRICS.
You know, do you know there's a body you should name? Non-Allied Movement.
Yeah.
Where's that body right now? Well,
Non-allied movement sounds familiar.
There's,
What was
a,
that?
there's actually a body. It's one of those, it's out there. Non-Allied Movement. It's supposed to be for nations that didn't want to be seen as West or East. So they're somewhere in the middle, the Indian, the Emiratis, the Cambodians, and all those nations. But where is it? I remember there because some things cannot work if the timing has not come. Are you getting it?
Yeah.
That it's not BRICS that is making the time. It is the time that is making BRICS.
That's the thing, exactly.
Exactly.
It is the time that
There's
because
making
BRICS
BRICS.
has been there for a while now.
Since
Do you know that?
2008.
It's been there
It's
for
been
a while.
since 2008.
It was launched during President Zuma's
Yes.
administration at that
Yeah.
time, but it was very quiet. It was neither here nor there.
It's the times that has made BRICS, not BRICS making the times.
Prophecy coming to pass.
Exactly. Then those who were weak just find strength to do what they would. Think about it. Then you start selling wheat and barley for way below market price. It's the time that causes it. And that was why I remembered non-allied movement. This is one thing they tried to do, right? BRICS should just remain non-military. Just do business. Let nations do business and be free to do business. Because the West had literally captured the system to do business that was given them on a gentlemanly agreement. So they didn't win the battle of the gun to institute dollars. Everybody chose to use dollar for a reason. But now it's now a weapon. So BRICS must remain that. And once again, when you see them, introduce them to the prophet. Nations must be guided and know that, because what you see is they now get proud, they now fall apart. Plus, I'm becoming suspicious of some countries that are applying for BRICS. Some countries don't actually have foreign policies. The Americans are their foreign policies.
Oh,
They're told what to do,
Yeah,
And
so
yeah.
some countries might just be applying for BRICS
to be despised.
to not just be the spies, to be the spoilers. Because currently, BRICS runs a system of equal vote, which if you put something like a override vote, distrust is going to come in.
Yeah.
That means if there are 5 and they vote for something, if they become 10, your power of vote drops. That means if the West can send one of their moles, like Macron was trying to do, right, BRICS is dead. So, on one hand, everybody's rejoicing, trying to, like, everybody's coming in, but it must be very weary. I don't even, if I had the magic wand, I would say they should form a 10 or 5 year stage process to fully become a member. So you become an associate, you become something where you don't have equal vote. So you don't dilute South Africa's vote. You don't dilute Brazil's vote. Because think about it. There's something the Americans try to do with this Ukraine war, is get every nation to supply weapons to Ukraine. Have you ever thought of, it's like your neighbor, right, getting you to use your money, not for your family, for some other family that has it. And
Because
your
they
family
want-
have no choice.
they're the ones that have the beef.
Yeah,
But
and your
you
family
should
has
come
no-
and spend
yes.
your resources.
Your family has no,
Your enemy should become my enemy.
yes,
kind of thing.
exactly. That tells you the amount of control they have over a lot of nations.
That's it.
You get these
Yeah.
nations to join BRICS, they will crush BRICS from within. If these nations could not even say, no, we're keeping these weapons for our own need, but they were just giving it at the behest of an American foreign policy machine. Victor Newlands just goes in there and you start giving your weapons. As a matter of fact, some people like Greece, were giving weapons they were using to check the Turkish people. It just, some countries in Eastern Europe don't even have their own air defense system anymore. Do you know how you do to your own heart? Dutchland, Netherlands right now, they are in recession. Germany in recession. Just count them. Now, if that nation who is really not in control of her foreign policy joins BRICS, the American stooge is there already. They'll destroy it.
But I think in the context of what is actually happening, because remember, the unfortunate thing is the United States itself, or should we say the globalists that are actually stationed within Washington, they're actually working on a plan that is self-imploding. And even those who are spineless, like the nations that you are saying don't have foreign policy, they would have to get to a point when they would have to decide, do you want to go with something that is non-existent, or do you want to actually go with something that is actually existing at that time? I'm just thinking, if you look at the prophets that have actually gone, for example, remember Latin America, or dear man of God actually said, the spirits of witchcraft, which caused them not to actually see how much resources they had, and how the gospel would actually get to them, and then prosperity would be the mainstay of South America. And then you're looking at the kings of Asia. You know, they are coming, and you know, they have arisen. We used to know them as the Asian tiger economies, but it's extending to even countries that you wouldn't think, like your Vietnam, and you know, they countries that you wouldn't actually think they would actually come out of it. And then you have America, like you said, they are drunk on their own policies. And the good thing about them being drunk on their own policies is they are going to collapse with a third.
A very loud one.
Even those who were not so sure of where to stand, they would. It's almost like what happened to, you know, the previous empires. It didn't matter who you were. When you saw Babylon going, it was going. You had to jump ship. And I think that's the good thing about what Prophet has actually done, because when you look at it, again, it's a difficult thing, like you always present. If you are honeypotted, can you actually have a voice? You would need somebody to come and salvage you. And I think the salvaging that is actually coming from the church is the one that is actually going to
I think I
salvage most of these nations from what they've actually put themselves in.
They can't get out.
Yeah, they can't get out. Even with them actually seeing what is actually happening. How many times have we heard Greek politicians actually saying this was a terrible decision to send our ammunition there? Or Poland, they've said the same. But still,
they still send it.
They still send it because you are actually in a bind.
They're not in control.
Yeah. They were given money for their debt. What would you expect? So
not just that. We don't know.
there are many other
the
things.
grips. I don't know. You do things that are absolutely against your interest.
Yeah.
You said it was against your interest, and you did it anyways. A good example, the numbers just came out. The Russian export of wheat to Japan grew over 5,000%. Do you know what that sounds?
5,000%?
Not 500, 5.00. I'm saying
In what period of time?
that is like times in the last year.
In the last year.
And this is the same Japan that in every G7 put a pen to sanctions. How do you do that?
Anyway.
How do you, are you, so this,
They did it.
Japan is, once again, is a nation to be freed.
Yeah.
They've not been
Yeah.
freed.
Yeah.
No matter what they say about developed, non-developed, they can be developed, but they are a developed, not freed nation. They are not free. You're not free.
In fact, the Americans are actually building more bases.
They celebrated the Hiroshima Day, right? And oh, that was pathetic. That was really pathetic. So you know what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yeah.
Who did it?
The Americans.
Good. But when they gave speech, there was only one name they called in that speech of nuclear weapon, Russia.
Oh.
Like, how can you commemorate the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima? And the person your speech makes an enemy of is Russia.
Is Russia.
How did it's a country not free?
No, they're
Definitely.
influenced.
Definitely.
Definitely influenced.
And again, you're looking also at, like I said, the original plan for nations is essentially what you're seeing in many nations. Remember, we've spoken times and times again about how, you know, certain metrics don't make any sense.
Yeah.
You can say GDP per capita. You are in Russia. We're talking about how the quality of life that you actually saw with your own eyes when you get there. If you were to go to the metrics to say, all right, let's look at GDP per capita for Russia, maybe a country like Japan would actually come tops. But when you look at who is feeding who is actually sending money to who is actually giving you accommodation, And remember, you're looking at humanity where you start from food, then the next thing is
Basics.
shelter, and then clothing, and then you're looking at now some other social services to say, okay, do you have hospitals, do you have clinics? Are you healthy as a nation? Are you eating healthy? Some of those metrics, God is actually crushing them because they are forms of deception. There was a bag that was actually there in the world, which had different weights, where all of a sudden somebody can actually just decide, oh, is the person Nigerian? No, they are not living very well. And you ask by what standard? Because they don't have fluoride in their teeth. That's essentially what is actually happening. Like he's saying, for many years we know Japan has not been doing well in economics. They're actually going the other way. You have inflation, they're in deflation. But they still, like you said, put their signature on G7. And in fact, there is another meeting that is actually happening soon. They'll be saying whatever they're actually saying. It's a bunch of hot air that many nations were deceived by, but it's actually coming out. Even look at the so-called Easterners, the first ones to actually go for Russian wheat, barley, and some of the things that they were actually selling, including phosphates that were actually going to the countries that are actually farming in Europe. We are speaking of countries that are actually farming like Hungary. Then you compare that to France. With just 1 week, they're actually like Niger. They are deciding where do we switch off electricity, where do we shed
Yeah,
it.
no, they didn't plan. The point is they didn't plan for lack of supply of uranium.
Yes, because
They
they
thought
thought
it
it
was-
was
No, they had
continuous.
planned for the. It was not going to end.
Exactly. They planned world without end.
So now,
They were even going to get more.
Yes.
Of course.
And all of a sudden, the tap goes shut. And
And guess what? GDP per capita just went down. If we're to actually talk in real terms, because if you don't have electricity, even
It
your
will definitely
internet and
go down,
some
yeah.
other services actually starts going down.
Okay, wow. So these are very interesting times. Polarization of the nations, the aligning of the nations.
Yeah.
This is just prophecy being fulfilled. I wonder where it will be by the end of the year. You know, when we come back again and it's the 31st night service, where we are yet to receive another prophetic utterance from the Holy. I wonder where France will be. But we're praying for the nations.
we're praying
Yes,
for them.
yes.
For the nations of the world, you see, it should be a lesson though. Lessons are good to be learned, you know that?
Yeah.
Lessons are good to be learned. Now, apparently, the water supply was turned off when locals and visitors tried to put out the fires. And this is where? In Maui. Did you know that? Now, meet M. Kaleo Manuel, the official who refused to release the water in Maui, contributing up to 106 deaths. But apparently, from reports that are coming out today, it's like the death toll is rising.
Of course.
As the relief efforts
it was
continue.
actually underreported. People were screaming that is not the truth.
Yes. So it's the death toll is actually rising there. Manuel is Deputy Director of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. A Hawaiian Studies major, Kaleo prefers a traditional, holistic, one water approach where water is revered and actually not used. So even if you're burning up, he prefers to preserve the water and not use it for the purpose that it's supposed to be used for. That's what he says.
It's climate change.
In the name of climate change. Thank you. I was actually coming there. Now, this is him explaining that water should be revered and not used.
Responsible per our authorizing statute to protect and manage all water resources in the state. One Water is like taking it and looking at it from a holistic system perspective, and that's not any different than how Hawaiians traditionally managed water. You know, in essence, we treated Native Hawaiians treated water as one of the earthly manifestations of a god and a kua kane, and so that reverence for a resource and that reciprocity in relationship was something that was really, really important to our worldview and well-being, right? And living in an island, isolated from other, civilizations. And so I think where it shifted to today or over time is that we've become used to looking at water as like something which we use and not necessarily something that we revere as that thing that gives us life, right? I mean, to me, it's a shift in value set. And, if we can start to really look at how we as humans in an island can reconnect to that traditional value set. So really my motto is always like, let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity.
Okay, so that's his take.
No, can you explain
That's his take.
in a few words? What did he just say?
No, it's a bunch of hogwash. Remember, for you to understand them again, you need to understand them from some of the beliefs that they actually have. A lot of people, particularly within Hawaii, they believe in this thing, Mother Gaia. I think you've heard that term, right? In fact, most of the people who subscribe to climate change believe in Mother Earth. That Mother Earth, there is a God behind called Gaia. And it's quite interesting that he's actually speaking of revering. Reverence is only for God. Is water a God? Water is actually a servant of God.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, water is a servant of God that it doesn't disobey God when it comes to where it's supposed to actually go. If you read in the book of Job, he actually talks of storehouses of hail, storehouses of ice, storehouses of water. And these are servants of God, they are told, which is why you find out water does not decide you are a wicked person, you are Bill Gates, so I'm not falling here as rain. And for him to actually come out to say, look, I have a different value set from what you have. So
No, in this
I'm
case,
supposed to
in
decide.
this case, the climate change was actually very intelligent because Bill Gates' own mansion there in Maui
It's fine.
is perfect. Not even an inch of grass burnt. Likewise, the rich neighborhood part of that Maui island is perfectly standing. In one video, I was even trying to verify it, if it was actually true. One house stands majestic around a whole charred area.
It's
and
true.
it stands there clean, not even a flame of fire. And I thought, okay, if it's true, then how did that actually happen? You see, Maui has really brought
the
about a
thing
lot
is,
of questions when it comes to this.
If you just
issue
do
of climate change.
a dig on who owns the house is actually owned by some of those NGOs.
Of course.
And then this interesting guy that was saying, whatever he was saying, is actually from the Clinton Foundation.
So, I think for me, the conversation then becomes, what's next then for the people of Hawaii? I mean, clearly whatever happened in Maui, it's a lot of things that have brought about a lot of questions. It's highly questionable. What could have happened? People have died. But I keep asking myself then, what's next for the people of Hawaii? What do they do next?
Maybe the question is, what's next for the rest of the world? Because the fires are spreading. As of today, Spain was actually the casualty.
Yes,
of
they're
the
targeting
so-called
different
global warming.
countries. It's true.
So you would have to ask, because remember, it's actually coming from a central focus point. Just like they said, the admission that we saw from the media people that were actually doing investigation, I think it's Veritas. They said the next big thing after COVID is what? Climate change. And when you look at what they are accelerating between, and ideally we got to know it because of prophecy. Pastor actually came to tell us what was supposed to actually happen from May, June, July, August, September, before they have their meeting, the Agenda 23rd meeting that they have. There are so many points that they're actually going for. Those who are involved in pandemics are still actually going with the pandemics. And they are trying every other disease you can find. Those who are into the so-called climate change narrative, of course, they are running with it full-blown. And if you are not actually sort of protecting your nation from such, you might actually find yourself as a casualty, especially considering that you have these different groups. Like right now, you have somebody who speaks for, we should say, the climate change group. He is from the Clinton Foundation. He has been coached on how to say their police chief, the same thing is actually done in terms of training. And they can cry if they want to cry before media, and it will look like it's real. And then you have so many other points that they're using. Why did they turn off the water? Why was the alarm system, the warning system for hurricanes off?
The only exit was closed.
Why were the exits actually closed? Then the National Guard, why didn't actually get deployed when the citizens were actually calling for it? And then you're looking at medicines that were being blocked from reaching the people who had bans and stuff. And then if you look at, there's so many things. The children were told to actually knock off from school, so they were at home. And many of them became casualties.
Advance. There are things that happened in advance. You're right. Schools were closed down before the fire. Yeah. The officers that were supposed to have been on the island to help out as the first correspondent, they already had left the island. So they knew what was coming.
Okay, let's start in,
let's
start in Maui. Probably in the next 6 months before it becomes
a smart city.
Not just a smart, it could also become a huge, big military base. I mean, could be any. It
It's
could go
possible.
anywhere.
Yeah, of course.
It's
Yeah.
very
Of course.
possible.
But these people bank on forgetfulness of their audience, but we don't forget.
Yeah. But when we also look at the similarities of, if you look at the Canadian fires, the same issues that are being raised by the residents who are saying the authorities were the ones who were barring us from taking from having access to our water so that we could actually fight the fires. It's the same thing that was also happening in Canada. Authorities were telling people, run away from the fires. And the authorities that were coming in, majority of them, or some of them, did not have the expertise or the knowledge of fighting fires. They were telling farmers who have had experience over time of dealing with wildfires in their own farms to say, you need to move aside,
And let the experts.
Let the experts. In the meantime, they don't even have the resources on the ground to actually fight the fires, but they're telling people to move aside. Why are you telling the people to move aside? Because if you then go
that
back...
sounds like ivermectin.
Exactly. if you actually go deeper, you then start realizing that there were squabbles and discussions about, oh no, you need to actually seed your land. You need to stop doing A, B, C, D in your farms. You need to actually... One farmer in Canada actually lost a whole head of cattle from the fires. And yet, he actually lives close to a water body. And they could have just simply fought off the fires because the authorities were blocking them from going there. And you can see that there is a concerted effort here to say the environment that you live in, you're not in charge of it.
Yeah.
We are the ones who are in charge of the environment that you live in. So you should not take any action without our approval. And it's a communication that if you are to marry it to what has been happening during COVID-19, where your rights have been taken away, it's exactly what they're doing. It's priming people to say, we are the one. If you see danger, don't do anything about it, even if you can calculate to see, okay, fine. I can
If you have
actually
a chance.
Yeah, I've got a chance here to fight this thing off before it gets to me.
And even
Don't do it.
if you know the arsonists who are actually responsible, like they did in Australia. Remember, this is not the first time this is actually being deployed.
Yeah.
In Australia, there were 330 arsonists that were known to have caused fires. And the fires, interestingly, they were just choosing the farmers that were refusing to do what they are actually stipulating. Guess what? If you go and do a search right now to say, okay, 330 arsonists from Australia, their names have actually disappeared on the internet. So you're looking at a concerted effort where we would drive you, for those who are into pandemics, would drive you until you actually accept that pandemics are a normal thing. For those who don't believe in climate change, would drive you until you just give up and say, right, climate change is real. I will do whatever they want to actually do. If you look at particularly the nitrogen side of things that they're actually deploying in Europe, because they have different things. If you have prime land in your country, wildfires would actually be set. And don't ask any questions, don't tell anything. If you are actually a farmer, they would come with either carbon dioxide emissions rising as a result of your farming activities, or it's nitrogen, which of course it's not measured easily. And then the next thing is you have the banks coming for you because they've actually sent a circular of some sort to say anybody who doesn't actually do what we want to do. Like now, you have in the Netherlands, yes, of course, the Farmers' Party is actually in charge and it's taking over soon. But now you have those so-called people who have not met the nitrogen targets. And you ask yourself, so what happened to the protests that they were actually giving? They are being told either you're going to lose your farm because they've set a taxation system of some sort. And that should tell you exactly what they're actually coming for. Just like Pastor said, go and check out what they're doing with your legislation when it comes to water. Yeah. Remember, the idea of fossil fuels was essentially introduced by the Rockefellers to create this idea of scarcity. When you look at oil is just a natural resource that replenishes itself. It's the same thing that you're actually hearing from that Clinton protege there, saying we need to revere water, we need to worship water, and then we should be able to withhold it because we decide so.
Let's let water unite us and not divide us.
I don't understand that thing.
Yeah. Who said water divides people?
What? Yeah, you see, we don't even know what to say. I'm trying to find the right words as well to explain.
See,
I think, you know what?
Liberal society have fallen into the trap that I can find in the scriptures in Moab. So look at Jeremiah's prophecy concerning the Moabites in Jeremiah chapter 48. The Lord said, the Moab have not been shaken. So he said, so their scent is not even. He said, so I'll send Moab, I'll send them to exile. The whole deception from the educational system has created trust your government, trust these experts, trust a certain way of presenting information.
Yeah.
Like he actually said nothing, but to a liberal school of, and I don't want to use that word liberal because it looks like I'm taking a whole bunch of ideology, to people who have been thus trained, he said something nice. Mark Zuckerberg, when he was comparing Thread with Twitter, he said the difference between Thread and Twitter is that Thread stands for kindness.
Social media, which stands for kindness.
What do you mean? How does it stand for kindness? I mean, people can still type crap there.
Yeah.
But you see, there's a way of passing a message, and some people have been primed, trained from a very young
Yeah.
age. It's their mentalities, their mentation, and their mindset. So these have become sold to years of deception.
Yeah.
And this deception is deep.
But
So-
how can you go and lie to people who live with water? This is an island.
No, you see, that's the point. Somebody can be trained to think a certain way. He will sit on gold and not spend it.
Yeah.
That is the power of the mind. He will sit on gold and die hungry.
It's amazing.
Because he's been
So-
trained. He's been trained to live it. And this is one truth that God is going to, there was one of the previous or two global days of prayer, global season of prayer that we did, where Pastor was talking about truth as a weapon.
Yeah.
Because truth it's only the truth by God's Spirit that can really break through this layer of thinking. And you see, let's say some things that really affect our faith with this kind of people. How can God bring help? God should represent kindness. They tell you what Jesus should be doing.
Not what they should actually be practicing.
And not what
yesterday we
Jesus
learned-
did. They tell you what Jesus, because they've been primed to think.
And we learned
it's-
yesterday that living in love is Jesus Christ alive.
Yeah.
You see, that's what we learned
But
yesterday.
they tell you that is that not why they made some changes to the Bible and called it Queen's James? Because
Yes.
if God is God, that's so nice, and
Be inclusive.
he should be inclusive.
It's really sad, though.
So
but
this
you know,
deception, and just to add one more, we did this check a long time ago and discussed it among friends. That a lot of Africans who just migrate, who are not strong on the truth, and migrate to Western society, they fall very victim to this Western.
Sophistication. Sophistry.
God thank you. God bless you.
it's really sad. And now to think that all these things that were supposed to have happened to help and assist the people did not happen. Do you know that within days, land offers to the indigenous people actually came? Now that they're in a state of desperation, I'm sure they can now say, listen, it's pointless for you to even go back there. Let me just buy it off so that you can start a new life. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's really horrible.
And they'll prime it
It's
with those
really
good,
horrible.
those good sweet nothings, that it will make a whole lot of sense.
But how do you even have it in you?
Even-
Someone
even-
is mourning. All right, let's suppose they are mourning because there are people who died. And you are offering to buy their land.
Oh, no, there are many people like that. Don't
But
worry.
remember,
Heartless people like
the,
that are
the
everywhere.
governor is actually
It's
in
not
cowards.
new.
Did you hear the statement that the governor actually gave? Says we are actually going to take off this land from most of them. Because remember, the idea is destroy what is known as prime land. With trees, with water sources, with everything else that now it's called charred remains, or it's just a bundle of what you debris.
Yeah.
And then they will tell you the value has gone down. This is essentially what the realtors will actually come and bring. They will show you, look at what you have now. You don't even have worms in the soil because of what has actually happened. So what should you do? Oh, we're going to have to treat this land and all, but at a loss. Why don't you accept this offer? Is it not the same thing that BlackRock and Vanguard is actually doing in the cities? We're talking mainland, not even the island. Not Hawaii, not Maui. We are talking the mainland. What are they actually doing when they want to actually take land from them? They engineer such things. Over time, you're told your house is no more worth it, or there's a housing crisis of some sort. Eventually, you get to a point where you just give in and say, let me sell it. Maybe I can actually just go start a new life somewhere else. And this is, when you look at the events, July there was a conference to a smart city effect. There's another conference again that is actually happening to make sure that it is not just a smart city, it's a smart city and the first surveillance city.
Okay, there we go.
And that summit is actually something that is actually going to be held, I think, in September, if not in October. And most of these people were actually primed. And if you listen to where it is actually being discussed, the World Economic Forum actually put them, just like they did Sri Lanka, say, how to turn your country into what? That they did the same when it comes to how to turn Maui, particularly that portion, into a smart surveillance city, not just a smart city. And one way to do that, like I said, it has been done in the past. They've done it to Australia when it comes to the farmers. Most of the farmers have left. We saw the farmers crying during COVID because of water.
Yeah.
What did? They set up a water market. All of a sudden, water that is in a river that passes by you, you can't actually access it because there are gates now.
So have been commoditized.
Yes, so we are praying for, oh, wow.
And you're going to see a lot of
Elizabeth.
commoditized software, commoditized natural resources. So,
Like water for sale?
Yeah.
yep.
They
Wow.
actually said so. If you look at COP27, there is a former Bank of England governor who actually said the goal that is actually in the Bank of England is not equitable to what the global south is in terms of natural resources. And they said we need to bring tokens, therefore.
Oh.
And tokens is essentially another way to tell you we need to commoditize it.
That's it. Now, in another development, Russia just publicly accused deep state actors and big pharma of manufacturing the COVID pandemic to take over the world. They even listed Obama, Clinton, Biden, and Soros of being the main ideologists behind the plot.
In true fifth-generation warfare, you do not know who your opponent is. Example, who is responsible for, who's the puppet master behind the COVID crisis as we've experienced it? Who is it? Anybody here know? Was it Klaus? No. There's something above Klaus. Was it Biden? Was it Tony Fauci? These are all surrogates, okay? You don't really know who is managing the message that has been propagated on you. That's fifth-generation warfare. Over the last 3 years, Western governments, non-governmental organizations, transnational organizations, pharmaceutical industry corporations, media and financial corporations have cooperated via public-private partnerships, which I assert is a euphemism for fascism, to deploy the most massive, globally harmonized psychological and propaganda operation in the history of the world. Okay? Over the last 3 years, you have been subjected to the most massive, harmonized, globally coordinated propaganda campaign in the history of the Western world. Full stop. With this campaign, the governments of many Western nation states have turned, okay, this is key, military-grade psychological operations strategies, tactics, technologies, and capabilities developed for modern military combat against their own citizens. These are inconvenient facts. The world that many of us believed existed no longer exists if it ever did.
США, как и в 2019 году, приступили к подготовке к новой пандемии путем осуществления поиска мутаций вирусов. Не исключаем применение Соединенными Штатами так называемых оборонительных технологий в наступательных целях, а также в целях глобального управления путем создания кризисных ситуаций биологического характера.
I find this very interesting. I asked this question, though, to Miss Maria Zakharova. I asked her, I said, so what is your take on the globalist agenda that is being perpetrated by the West? You know, they're pushing their own ideologies, pandemics, climate change, and all that. I don't think she answered me. Did you hear her?
Yeah, of course.
She left me thinking that, what did she just answer? Because I don't think she answered me at all. But now I'm surprised.
If you want the truth, you would actually get it, not from a press secretary, but from the army.
Yeah.
This
Defense,
is DoD Russia now, the
This
Department
is
of Defense.
defense now
and,
talking.
and when you look at, remember, the
I guess
Department
so.
of Defense, or the equivalent that is in Russia, because I know it's the most likely not called Department of Defense. They've actually highlighted quite a number of things, not only now, where they've actually come out with this allegation. Before, they are the first ones to say the Americans were actually calling for DNA. And they wanted to create a bio weapon where you can actually eliminate somebody on the basis of their DNA. And that's the same thing we get to find out the mRNA shots can actually do, because they can decide to make you milk intolerant, meat intolerant, or they can do much more than what they've actually admitted to. And if you look at that, and then you're also looking at issues to do with global control, all of a sudden, the Biden administration, which was actually pushing for the pandemic treaty, remember they were funding and sponsoring it, of course in partnership with the WHO, they've set up an office known as the office, a permanent office of pandemic preparedness. Permanent office. It should tell you what they're actually trying to do, because they're pushing the pandemic treaty, which is actually a power grab. And at the same time, they are setting up a perpetual office that is actually dealing with that, on the basis of something that is now known within the military circles as a bioweapon. It's a biodefense weapon. It has actually been proven. And I think for the Russians to actually come out, they are trying to actually give the world the truth that has actually been going on for the past 3 years.
Because in the Donbass, they took over some of the labs.
Okay.
So it's not...
They can now see the evidence.
No,
right
actually,
before
they
them.
sent pictures. I have seen some of the pictures of the procedures. It's just like, it's a picture, and they tell me what's in the picture. I don't know the chemicals in the picture, but they were saying this is possible to produce this level. So they worked part with some of the stuff they saw and COVID. And they're like, okay. They kind of dotted it from, they talked about anthrax as well.
Yes.
But you remember, it's not only one lab they saw. Not only one lab they saw. They took over many labs. And they've just taken only 20% of Ukraine. And they've seen that many labs. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? They've taken less than 20%, given that they lost Kharkiv. So you can imagine. And they've seen that many labs. And even Victoria Nuland said it.
Robert Kennedy Jr., in just his recent interview with Tucker Carlson, he also
said it.
Highlighted what is happening in Ukraine.
Said it before the Foreign Affairs Committee that they are research labs, and she's scared that they're falling into the hands of the Russians. If it was harmless...
They're scared it has fallen into the hands of... They denied that they even had labs to begin with.
They now said it's just
so now they're scared that it will fall into the hands of Russians?
Before the Senate, a Senate committee. She said it.
Don't forget that the first pandemic that is actually referenced when they are talking of pandemics, it actually came from a military lab.
It's all military.
And it caused whatever was actually happening in terms of response. For example, when you're looking at the standard protocols that WHO is actually using, they were essentially what was actually given by Bill Gates' grandfather. On the basis of what was actually happening, where soldiers were going to different places and they were carrying some of the pathogens. And if you look at the idea of obfuscating whatever disease you're actually having and what you're doing, the documents actually still remain classified as of today. And this is essentially a pattern that they've established to say, so how do you actually affect a pandemic? All you need to do is you need to do it on these quarters. And the military is the one that is actually doing it because they are classified most of the times. And at the end of the day, you are not going to actually see what actually comes from the DOD most of the times. But we know because the Pfizer's, the Moderna's, they actually admitted that the research for mRNA actually started with the DODs.
Yes.
And the DOD have come out on their own with videos that are actually supplied and available on the internet to say it's a bioweapon. And we are testing it so that we'll be able to actually deploy it wherever we want to actually deploy it. Maybe we want to actually get rid of a certain group of people, terrorists, so they say, on the basis of their DNA. But for it to have actually been sponsored by a whole government, this is the White House, the Biden administration. The White House was actually behind the pandemic treaty. They were sponsoring it and they were having seminars. Remember, they took one of our own, I think it's the Senegalese Macky Sall, president. They brought him to the pandemic treaty and a number of other individuals. Definitely, there is some truth to what the Russians are actually saying, to say this was a global tool that was deployed so that they could take power.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what we're saying.
I just love the fact that the Russian intelligence is actually catching up to the prophetic.
About what we knew before. It's not like we didn't know this before.
Yeah, exactly. The prophetic actually said, look at America there. Go and ask
Yeah,
Fauci.
but I also would like to know what their interest is. I mean, are they just playing good hearts? Now, the Russians.
No, of course they're taking
You understand? We also need to know what they're
Definitely, when they get that stuff, they go make the same weapons out of it.
Yeah, we want to. But I think at this point in time, we're saying, can we do it at a respectable diplomatic level where we are all in agreement? You take this, yes, we also benefit this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Not like what we have seen over the years, where it's just taking and plundering resources and Africa remains poor and poor. So if the Russians are saying, listen, we're helping you, Africa, we want this is where we stand. We would like 1, 2, 3, but let it be also very and highly beneficial to the African guy, because they can't just be there because
No,
they want to
see,
be there.
it's a word of trust
One
but
costs
verified.
a lot of money.
It's a word
To
of
be on the ground, their boots, it costs a lot of money.
It's a
does,
word of
yeah.
trust but verify, right? Trust but verify. The only thing the narrative that the Russians have going for them is they've not colonized anyone.
Yes, they run on that banner that we've never colonized
yes, they run on
anybody.
that. But
No, they've not colonized anyone in the past, because from prophecy we'll see that they will colonize
no,
somebody.
but no. I mean,
Of
when
course,
we're
that's what they
talking,
pride
we're
themselves
talking,
now.
we're talking narrative. That's why I
Yeah,
said their
exactly.
narrative runs on we've not colonized anyone. But the renaissance of Africa should not be. We should see Russia as a security outfit
Yeah.
and an economic partner.
Yes.
Nothing else.
Partner, that's it. Not to then now
Why do
give
I say security
out all
outfit?
your guard
Because you can't take on
The
the
Wagners.
monsters across the Mediterranean on your own. Just given military parity, you cannot. So you need a good security outfit, then you need an economic partner. Africa has brains and resources and a young population to do anything they want to do. The Russians have massive land and they have resources as well. They can work. They can work together. But trust but verify.
Trust but verify, and don't let your guard down because, oh, now it's Russia. We understand, we appreciate, but from the past experiences, I believe that the level of knowledge now
Yeah,
should be a bit
it's
much higher.
mature. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's something I want to point out here, and that was from Malone. And we cannot say this, repeat it enough. What he's saying is, according to him, the elites are turning a military-grade psychological operation, I'm quoting him, on their citizens. What does that mean? What does military-grade psychological operation, what does it mean? Psychological, it means they're not getting anything under your skin, they're not getting anything, they're just changing your mind. Psycho. What does that mean? And when you hear that, you know the danger that befall many nations, because we're saying in a couple of years, some people will be doing something they would otherwise not have done if the government did not switch on the button.
Yeah.
And this is where one of the saving things for this world will be something like your loved world. Why do I say that? Because it's either deliberate or if you do nothing, you're already a victim. Like if you do nothing and all you do is have your remote control switch turning on channels, you're already a victim. Because everything is planted in that thing you want to watch. In the next movie that will win Oscars, in the next Barbie, I heard there's something trend called Barbie. Did you hear that?
I don't know, I don't follow those things.
Yeah,
What is that all about?
Absolutely. I just saw the headlines. Barbie.
No, it's ultimate feminism.
Okay, cool.
And I
Essentially.
bet you the mainstream media
But
is running
now
with this.
it's ultimate feminism that is targeted towards children.
Oh.
So the children are being taught that there shouldn't be no men in your world, and the men are staying at
whoa.
home and they're not doing nothing.
Okay.
It's
You
really
get
ugly.
you see, speaks exactly what I'm saying. That is a psychological weapon. Why do I say something like your loved one is a solution that can beat that? Constantly taking in the word of God. Let's assume I'm taking half of my inputs are coming from your loved one, half, and half of my inputs are coming from that. What will happen? My mind will become a battlefield of two truths. Let's say I'm taking both of them in the same measure. My head will become a battleground of two truths that are incompatible. One must win. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Now, let's say, because remember, it's a military grade
Psyop.
psyop. So it's with intention. Now, let's also remember the word of God is military grade as well.
Yeah.
Sharper than any two.
Edged sword.
Good.
There
good.
we go.
So let's say you're taking
Penetrating every
bone,
nook,
marrow,
everywhere. It penetrates.
everything. So let's say you're taking both in right measure. Your head would just be, you will need a balance because one must win. And we know that. But if you were taking the world 51% and you're taking less of this word, you see, you're already putting
You're in
yourself at an
trouble.
advantage, a disadvantage.
You're in
Yes.
trouble.
This is why I say, what the man, this outfit of your loved one is it's a savior to many. And we're seeing that the problem is not even there yet, but the salvation is already there. Where you just need to take in your word. We studied eternal life yesterday. And this morning I was ruminating over those words. Practicing, understanding, eternal life. That's all I was just thinking. Those, is it 4 words? Practicing on 3 words. I was just thinking about it. Now, if I now go take psycho, no, I would rather choose to practice eternal life than to Babi.
Exactly.
Than to Babi. And this is where our young people must get it. Fill yourself with this word. Play this message. They gave us week. Just fill yourself, because somebody has prepared a military-grade weapon to change how you think. And if you do nothing, you've already lost.
Just an example, the United Kingdom, 7 days ago, in Oxford Street, London, the young people were influenced to go and loot. The same thing that we've been seeing in America.
Yeah.
We saw it here in South Africa. It was there in the United Kingdom. And then you ask yourself, so what is the mindset of the person who is running in the street, going into a shop to actually loot? Because they're now seeing it as it's fashionable, it's trendy, it's
And
proper.
there's a phone on.
Yeah.
Their faces are there. But they think this is cool.
Yeah.
That is what I'm saying. Their minds lost to somebody else's weapon.
And don't forget that there's 5G already, because 5G can actually do that.
Yeah, can do psychops.
From the new revelations that has actually come out when it comes to, remember, we knew the side effects of what the mRNA shots can actually do, because Pfizer released that, large tranche of, side effects. But now there are so many revelations that are actually coming with things like leprosy is something that is actually a side effect of the mRNA shots. There are many people who have actually turned leprosic in addition to the terrible cancers. And when you look at what they were saying when it comes to mRNA shots and the connection with 5G, the very same thing that we saw from the diagram that Pastor was actually showing. It will be easy for them to actually, let's say the teenagers, especially if they've taken the shots,
Do you
because
know
they
what
can do
I
something to
also
your mind.
think, in addition to the vaccines and all that, I just think generally out there are some stupid people that just do stupid things.
Of course.
People that are just lazy. People, it also even goes back to upbringing. The family structure that the devil is trying to
Destroy.
Yeah.
Doesn't the Bible tell us that raise a child in the way that they should go? Yeah, and some people's don't underestimate the power of upbringing. That's number one. And then the world is just full of lazy people.
Yeah, I agree
Just
with
lazy
you.
people that just do
There's-
stupid things at any given opportunity that they are given. Then, of course, in addition to the vaccine.
but of course,
you're right.
That's
now
engineered
imagine
though.
the disaster.
No, you see, man, I mean, there's a psychologist, I'll let you speak shortly, but let me just say the word of the psychologist that the natural intent of man is to not use his potential.
Now you think it's fun to go loot a Louis Vuitton shop because you've always wanted a Louis Vuitton bag. You see, you're conformed to the things of the world. You now think it's nice to go and loot this store. I saw full-grown men stealing steak.
Yeah.
Didn't you see it?
Yeah.
A full-grown man running and stealing steak while they were being filmed. Their faces are out there and just didn't think it mattered. That's stupidity. Can you blame that on the vaccine?
No, you see, no, not vaccine. Psych up. See, when we talk about zombie apocalypse, some people might be
What
thinking,
if that person didn't even get a vaccine?
No,
They are
it's not.
going
I'm
to
not
steal
talking
steak.
No, you see, that's the difference between what I'm saying and what you're saying. When it's psych up, nothing was injected into you. All that got to you was sound and words.
But
Let's put a psych up. Let's do a typical example of psych up that a country is using now. China in the Uyghur camps. You see, you just hear this sound at a certain frequency, unhealthy frequency, that says, chi is God, chi is God, chi is God, chi is God. It's played at a regular program. There's a schedule for it. Then you just get up and think
on your
he's
program,
God.
connecting the dots. And I actually thought this was a horror movie I was watching on your program. Wasn't that something that plays with people's psyche that Hollywood is
it
doing?
does.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying don't think vaccine, don't think chemicals. Think sound and words. Think about another thing I thought about this morning when I was thinking of this practicing understanding eternal life was what Pastor said, Colossians. Christ in me.
Yeah.
What he did. Neither, he was, let me repeat what I heard him say. He would go on his knees, 30 minutes, he would just say, Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christ in me, the hope of glory. 30 minutes, he gets up. He did it for over 30 days, and nothing happened. Anything happened? No. So, but psychologically, he's been programmed. But more so because he's using another military-grade weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritually, he
I
was
think
doubly
you people are
programmed.
even taking it far. The ones that listen, there are people that just don't listen and just do crazy things on
Yvonne,
this
you
earth.
would believe me? No, see.
Because they saw somebody next door running
Energy
amok.
can
They
neither be
also ran
created.
amok.
See,
Haven't you
energy,
seen people like that before?
Yeah.
energy can neither be created nor destroyed. I'm saying
Fair enough.
but it's transferred. So when you see somebody do something, there is a cause. I mean, the law of inertia say an object at rest will remain at rest.
So I've got a question now. So if somebody dives into a river where or a swamp where there are crocodiles, these people, because they've heard and they will also dive into the swamp of crocodiles.
They will. Did I not tell you years ago? Didn't you remember? Nelly came with a music video, had a plaster. We don't know why he had a plaster on his cheek.
Everybody had a
Everybody had a plaster on their cheek. It was.
But I think, I think
You
what,
must have had a pimple. Why do you have a plaster
but
on
I
your
think,
face?
I think
It's awesome.
what she's actually highlighting is, as much as you might not actually see labels, there are spiritual labels attached to why certain of those behaviors are actually happening. For example, you wouldn't just think, Nelly, if he was not going somewhere and they were not projecting something on him, nobody, including the villagers, would actually be looking for a elastoplast for them to actually put whatever. But it's because there is something that they've actually done. Like you said, remember when you were speaking about COVID, COVID is not essentially the vaccine, which is why the diagram that our dear man of God actually brought to us was essentially something that is holistic. Showed us, look, this will actually lead to that.
Yes.
And then there's control on this thing, there's fear on this thing. Which is why they are deploying things that are used for control. For example, when you look at the military, yesterday you mentioned something that is actually very key for those who want to eject the so-called foreign military bases. The citizens should participate in what the military is actually doing. There is no war that the so-called paratroopers or the troops that are actually going would actually win without having the society agreeing with them in terms of where they are going. And I think that's exactly what is actually happening. Because when you look at COVID, COVID opened a number of doors for them. For example, you are looking at setting up militias. Remember, during COVID, the same COVID that we are experiencing, there were certain militias that were going out, Antifa, BLM, and the like. Today, they've deployed it differently. You have the Voice in Australia.
Yeah.
The same is actually happening in Canada. You know, the so-called first people of Canada who have actually come out to say reparations and the like and the like. It's the same thing that he's actually speaking up when he's saying it's a military psyop. Either you escape the vaccines, we're talking of the injections, the intrusions. There's something that they're actually doing with the environment. For example, when you look at what 5G would do, let's say outside of the vaccine itself, it can actually send sounds, like we saw from that DOD video where they're actually saying we can send sound at a certain frequency.
Yeah.
And then it will cause people to run amok. Surely, it wouldn't make any sense for anybody else to just decide. So, there is CCTV, there is juvenile prison for you if you are caught, if you are young. There is actually prison for you if you are caught and you are an adult. And somebody just decide, all right, I'm actually going to go to Louis Vuitton that has got HD CCTV in 4K or 8K. And then you get yourself a criminal record and the like. If not somebody...
You're even going a notch higher. Criminal record. I don't think there's a criminal record. You see, the youths we are talking about, they have been doing it daily on the streets. They can just blockade a street. You don't see police people coming there. If they do, it's very late or delayed response.
And they just call them
clearly
and
you can
release
tell
them.
that there's some agenda. I just don't understand what kind of an agenda this is. But it's happening. I'm even saying this because I end up feeling sorry for the parents that have their teens there and their children there. You know, the heart of a parent will always be the heart of a parent.
Oh.
That is the really saddest part of it.
Please, most times, don't even pity for the... I saw an interview and I stopped that. When these kids bring something home, they just enjoy
the steaks.
it. Yeah, they just enjoy it.
No, those are the stupid people I was telling you now that just do stupid things at the same time.
The point is, right, let me ask you, when did they start being that stupid? If you want
Maybe
to
we
study
should
it,
interview
because
one parent or one youth who...
nobody was born that way. These people would not have done these things 5 years ago. they wouldn't have.
They were not even doing it last year.
They weren't even doing it last year. So the point is, you stop there and say, where did it start? You say start here. What were they taking in before it started?
Yeah, but you're asking a very good question. A very good question. Just look at how policies are being created, where parents don't have a say. I saw one interview of one young man who is one of the leading trendy people in the United Kingdom who does these kind of things, where so he's got his followers. They follow him to go into shops and ransack. And in the interview, he was asked, so what do your parents actually say when they see you do these things? He said, I don't talk to my parents. So my parents don't approve of what I'm doing, but I'm my own person.
Yeah.
These are his words.
I'm a young adult now.
I'm a young adult. I make my own decisions. They don't have to approve of what I'm doing. I just go do, and that's my life.
That's really
No.
sad.
So
That
you've
is
got
really sad.
this liberalism, these policies that are being passed that are aiding to kids. It's like what Pastor was saying, that the state is actually raising its own children.
Yep.
So this is their own person who says, I can go and ransack a shop. I don't need my parents to actually tell me no.
I agree with you.
Yep.
In fact, I agree with you. So I found out that these schools, the so-called international schools. So it can be, for example, an American international school that will open up in an African country. And then when you go and find out their curriculum, what you want to know what curriculum they
It's
have.
an American curriculum.
That's how one school shocked me here in South Africa. Apparently, it mimics an American style that was, I don't know, one guy somewhere there who came up with that system of education. Apparently, it's meant to liberate the kids and teach them to be independent at a young age. Do you know what they do? In the full day of a school day, 3/4 of that day, they spent it outside, talking to each other, expressing their thoughts.
Okay.
So they are growing. They are
Okay.
realizing their potential.
Okay.
Then part of it is they come to the class and then they learn. Now, if you see the curriculum of that class, what they are learning is the most useless, type of education
Of course.
that I've ever seen. I had to ask, I said, so where does this lead after they have, parents have paid such a hefty school fees?
What, American
so
grades?
then what happens? Even if the spelling is wrong, they don't care about that. They said, all we just care is that the child was able to express what they wanted to express.
Wow.
And then 3/4 of the time they're out there, they go out on different excursions. God knows what happens at those excursions. They're just there, running amok and crazy. How then do you expect to have a prosperous generation?
Yeah, of
But
course.
that's
It's
an
very
antichrist.
simple.
Avalanche.
It goes back to what this young man is saying, what you say. I'm my own person,
Yep.
and my parents don't have to tell me anything.
It's an antichrist spirit, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah,
In
operating here, because-
Christianity, in children's school, they are taught different things. I'm a foundation school teacher. So when the children are graduating, they are given time to recite certain things, like summarize what they have learned. Oh, wow. I look at these kids and I'm like, so brilliant. I was taught that I should respect my parents. The word of God tells me I can be what I want. I have to use the name of Jesus. It's different
That's
things.
impute. That's impute too.
Something that was put into...
Yeah.
So I believe it. Now we see these kids in America. Now think about this. What kind of education system is in the public schools? What kind of education system is... It's really sad though.
And that
But
is-
the
but
outcome-
remember,
that's what I'm saying
It's a
is
lie that is always,
military-
it's a lie that has always been there. For example, you mentioned something that I liked yesterday, and it's a common truth. Who goes to war when there's war? Is it the child of the president?
No.
The child of the kings?
No.
No. It's that citizen that was actually given either they fast track your citizenship from, whatever the former colonies, and then you become a full citizen. If you look at it, there are certain spaces where you will never be allowed if your spelling is actually wrong. That means those children are not meant to be integrated in society. They're essentially bandits.
Something else.
They're
Useless
essentially
people.
bandits and militias that are actually being raised.
So
'Cause
the state has been doing this for a while.
Of course.
Remember I started
Which
saying
is why then there's a separation of who you become in this life. You're very right.
just look at
an
it this way.
avalanche doesn't just fall. That's how I started this
You're
segment.
right. I see you now. I see the picture.
It's all those things. Then you like these kids. Why are they acting crazy? I said stop. When they started it, just go look at their inputs. Look at what they've been taking in. And once again, I'll refer you back to Pastor. When he said Christ in me, the hope of glory. If I was the one, I'd get bored after the first 5 days. right? Like, I'm saying Christ in me, the hope of glory, for 30 minutes, and nothing is happening to me. But the difference is he was faithful, finished it for over 30 days. Because a lot of people get bored. I'm just saying Christ in me. In the same way, these kids and their parents were like, they're letting them stay outside for long, but they don't look bad.
No, until
become
you
masters.
need them to actually do something meaningful. For example, you cannot, and you will not allow such a child that has been doing such kind of excursions to actually get in the cockpit of a plane and tell you they are flying you from one point to the other.
True.
You, at that point, you realize that this was not essentially for their own good, for their own upkeep. It's the same thing that the Rockefellers actually did with the whole medical schools, the universities.
Yeah.
They
educational
changed.
systems have been planned already.
Until now, we are essentially speaking of pharmacia, which is making people sick so that you make more money. And the interesting thing is, all of them became specialists. That means if you are dealing with a dentist, he's only going to tell you what is actually been taught in medical school.
You know, in sociology, I learned something. In sociology, when they build communities or whatever, a country or a city, they have what they call an A group, a B group, a C group, and a D group. And they are put in certain areas because of the classification they are in. If you look at it, a certain classification of an area has a certain education
Traits.
system
Of
and
course.
traits
Of
that
course.
are in that community. And that's why you find rich people are concentrated in certain areas. Poor people are concentrated in certain areas. Maybe the educated are also concentrated in certain areas. People that have different mannerisms and behavioral systems are concentrated in certain areas. It has always been meant to be like that. And to think that they come and teach us in school and say it's sociology, you have to understand the community. You see, there's always been that
psyopath.
wrong system of education that has been given to people right from the word go. We just might have not understood it then,
Yeah.
Yep.
but I think it's in the clear now.
Which is why
Yep.
Pastor said the old normal was already rigged.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you went to school. What is an Ivy
Whoa.
League school?
Well,
That's
we're-
essentially
we're not
another way
gonna
to,
ru- we're not
to
gonna-
identify you in the society, right?
Yeah.
So, or you went to an Ivy League school, okay, come and head this company, come and head this nation or
And you
this
wonder.
NGO.
So that's why the man of God says you might have failed in school, but that means that doesn't mean that you're a failure in life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you fail at the word of God, then you've lost it all.
There's no
Yeah.
hope for you now.
I mean, does it become more clear if we talk about, you see, from education, we've talked about education, we've talked about psych-op, we've talked these various ways where layers of condition that have been in the mind, people can now be changed. You now understand the words, be not conformed to this world.
Absolutely. Yes.
Be not conformed,
Yes.
but be transformed by,
The renewal. the
Of
word.
your mind.
because the world was not actually conformed for something good. It was conformed by the dictates of some people who were satanically engineered.
Now we're seeing all these things happening in the societies. We're seeing all these things happening in the world. And these are the end
Yeah,
times now.
exactly.
So the devil is out there doing what he's doing.
And God is saying, do not be conformed. And we think, oh God, you're making this into spiritual.
No, you're
He's
old-fashioned.
saving you from something.
You're
Or
old-fashioned.
when the scripture says, love not the world, neither the things. If you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. It's not something super spiritual. We're just breaking it down.
Yeah.
And saying that the fabrics of the world itself was designed to perpetuate man as an instrument of destruction.
Yeah.
And the reason why the celebration of 200 episodes of Your Love World are actually very important. I remember in one of Your Love World, the man of God actually
We've
pointed...
changed people's minds.
Exactly.
Exactly.
He actually pointed out that if you go back to actually look at the education system right now, it was hijacked.
Yes,
Yes,
you
he said
It
that.
has
spoke
been.
about it.
Yeah,
You
it
said
has
right
been.
from the beginning, because the people that came up with the education system, the Rockefellers, come on now.
They did it with an intention.
Yeah.
And they took it to that point where they can perpetuate, they can bring people to an expected response to everything. So once you hear the word, is an expert, you just back off.
Sure.
Can you take that water and put up that fire? The experts say
says
you
no.
shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will not do it.
Can you imagine?
Your own mind now.
So you
you're
see your house
suspending it.
burn down because the expert told you not to take ivermectin.
Okay, so can we get into a session of changing the mind?
Amen.
Right now of the
Definitely.
world, right?
Amen.
And fill it up with the word of God. That's what we're about to do now. So we are about to start our second session for today with our dear man of God, make sure you participate and listen to what our dear man of God has to say. All these things that we're talking about, this is true. We're not making these things up. These are things that are happening. Go and study it for yourself. I promise you. You know, when I did it in sociology, I thought, oh, no, it's just education that I'm getting. I now later thought about it. I said, hold on.
Those programming you are
I'm
getting.
telling you, people are playing with our minds here. And this is really not good. So be blessed, and we will be right back after service. God bless you.